Welcome. It's an absolute pleasure, privilege and an honour on behalf of the For Abu Dhabi initiative to welcome you here for this peer review panel and the second For Abu Dhabi network event during the World Urban Forum. My name is Jason Pomeroy. I'm an architect, academic, TV presenter, and I'm passionate about cities. So what is the Livability Initiative and why is it so special to Abu Dhabi? Well, it was created by the Department of Municipalities and Transport, and I certainly don't want to be stealing the thunder from Al-Jawaini here. So I'm definitely going to be asking you to come up and explain a bit more. And ultimately, what we're wanting to try and ensure here is that we're enhancing those spaces for both Emiratis and visitors alike. But without further ado, I'd really like to welcome you on stage to provide a bit more flavour to the proceedings to come. And then afterwards I'll introduce the esteemed panel before we then get into these individual presentations. So may I welcome Salem Al-Jawaini to the stage.
Hello, everyone can hear me? Good. My name is Salem Junaibi. I'm going to tell you a little about the For Abu Dhabi initiative. Now, the For Abu Dhabi initiative falls under the Ghadan 21 Economic Accelerator Program. And this accelerator program breaks down into 4 different pillars: business and investment, society, knowledge and innovation, and livability. Today, we fall under the livability section as DMT. And our focus is addressing 8 grand challenges that we are facing across the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. Some of them are about accessibility to nature sites. Some of them is trying to just get people to walk and use the urban spaces, enhance livability, get people to actually run and use different parks. And with that, we created the For Abu Dhabi initiative. And under it falls around 300 projects that span across the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. We're starting this phase in Abu Dhabi Island. And beyond, for phase 2, we will go to the mainland, Al Ain and Al Dhafra. And under the For Abu Dhabi initiative, our projects can be projects that allow us to explore, allow us to relax, or allow us to interact, or all together. And all these projects are people-based projects. They're looking at the community as a whole. They're focusing on the well-being, trying to build that DNA, like our discussion yesterday, trying to make it accessible to all different types of people and all ethnicities, and ensure that there's comfort and safety. Now, our regular planning process goes through, and with that comes projects. But today, what we're trying to look at within Ghadan is we're trying to look at people and how they actually use spaces and marry both planning efforts previously and actual use of spaces today. And with that, we can talk about a few projects that we have in Abu Dhabi Island. We have some streets like the Sheikh Rashid bin Saeed Street. We have places and communities. We're trying to create some pop-up locations to get people to use the spaces around their homes. Big parks, climate intervention, mobility, more cycling tracks around the whole island to get people to move, and introducing, of course, city color. Now, this is an example of an existing space, an existing mosque plaza. This is in the city. What we want people is to come and be comfortable about using the space. So what do people need? Not just seating area. They need shading, they need comfort, they need some visual interaction with the space. So this is what we are envisioning for such a space. In addition, this is another part towards Hamdan. It's packed. The paving differs from place to place, not much shading except for that big tree, perhaps for a block or 2. And with that, we want more colors, better paving, more artistic shading styles to come into the city. This is our third example of an open space that is just looking barren. Kids use this space today to play football. What can we do with it? How can we form it? It is not a park today. So we're envisioning to bring in sports into those locations. And our challenges today in Abu Dhabi Island differ than our challenges that we have in the mainland and towards Al Ain and Al Dhafra. And the character of the city and the demographic differs. So it's imperative during the whole process of our project creation and project envisioning that we think about who the end users are. They come at the beginning, not at the end, not after we finished our project. This is another example of existing municipality efforts that we have and in creating a good public space. Paving is good, everything is great, fantastic, nothing to change. But can we do better? So that's also something else. If something works, we're looking to do even better on that. And with that, we're looking to expand this across the whole island of Abu Dhabi and the rest of the Emirate, trying to make Abu Dhabi a more livable space, trying to get people to move, to use the spaces, and explore, relax, and interact with all these spaces. Thank you.
Salam al-Jubaili, thank you very much for that introduction. And what I want to do, I really want to try and get straight into this, because I can see that you're all sort of chomping at the bit, and I can see Barbara there looking very, very eager indeed. You must have about 780 million slides that you're going to try and get through in 15 minutes, right? So what I don't want to do, I don't want to sort of like dwell too long on this esteemed panel, but what I will say is that they are really, truly remarkable in each and every right. But before I do so, I just want to ensure that we all understand why we're here. And it's really about sort of improving the quality of life for residents and visitors, and looking at world-renowned artists to add colour and vibrancy. And ultimately, there's a range of industry experts here in this room who will be able to offer a few points of interest and a few comments. And I'm certainly looking forward to also engaging with you as the audience to also provide your feedback. We have a few mics that will be wandering around, and if you do want to contribute, please feel free to do so. Now, right from the far right, we have the former Deputy Mayor of Vienna, Maria Vassilakou. We then have Sharifa Yateem of SY Consulting. Landscape architect Andrew Grant of Grant & Associates. And I have the fortune of trying to keep the pace moving. My name's Jason Promer, as I mentioned, and we are all here to serve you. So without further ado, let's kick off with the first presentation. Kishore Varanasi, please step up to the stage. We look forward to your presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kishore Varanasi, CBT from Boston. I'm here today to talk about the climate intervention work that we're working on. We were asked to look at 3 different locations in Abu Dhabi that are very different from each other, and see how we can improve the outdoor thermal comfort using both science and design. So I want to show you these projects, but before we jump to the projects, I want to set the stage by explaining some of the understanding of the climate of Abu Dhabi and how we interpreted and analyzed the climate with the help of Bureau Happel, Rob Cook, who's sitting in the audience there. And really came up with a series of principles that were actually helping DMT on all of the projects that are ongoing, but then we applied more seriously into these 3 pilots. So Gadan principles, I'm going to save my time. Salem already pointed out, the idea is to really enhance the outdoor spaces for thermal comfort, obviously, to provide these goals and meet these challenges. And if this one will move. Okay, so when Abu Dhabi is hot, we know that we've been here, February, it's beautiful. You know, for 4 to 5 months of the year, Abu Dhabi is really beautiful. But there are times it is very hot. People around the world at least imagine these pictures. But the point of these pictures is you can see how everybody in this picture is seeking shade, particularly that gentleman who is really standing next to the lamp post, literally a narrow shadow. Shade means something in the environment, but shade itself is not really important. It can't really make places attractive. Standing like that, even though there is shade, is not the most interesting thing to do in the public space. Traditionally, there have been spaces that have been created to make them very comfortable at many levels in this region, in Abu Dhabi, in the UAE. There is a lot of lessons that we can learn from these spaces, which we did. And we also went out and measured what's happening really on the site. So what you see in this picture is air temperature 39 degrees Celsius. This was taken at noon in May. And you actually record the surfaces almost at 60 degrees Celsius. And you see this shade of the overhang of the buildings at 36. Even though it's not the most comfortable place underneath the building overhangs, you again see the value of the shade. But the idea that these surfaces are exposed, baking in the sun, is what makes it very challenging. And we also have done some imaging. There are obviously a lot of shade structures providing shade in public spaces, but is this the right kind of shade? There's a difference between shade and shading. If you provide shade on top in Abu Dhabi or anywhere in the world perhaps, it doesn't mean that you're getting shading down below. So we need to rethink the way we are providing and designing the shade structures. The image on the right-hand side is a thermal imaging camera that's measuring the temperatures both of the shade canopy, with the materiality of that is actually transmitting the heat, but also the space underneath it is almost measuring at 60 degrees Celsius. So how do we improve the condition through better design, better choice of materials, better choice of shading, landscape in these spaces is the challenge for us. And the measure that we use is called the UTCI, Universal Thermal Climate Index, which basically takes what a weatherman says when he says, the temperature really is 39 degrees, but you feel like 48 outside. So that's really what it is. But the scientists can run these on computers based on each location and say, this is what it feels like, given that particular location's microclimate. So we have a way of doing this, but the bottom line is the UTCI of 9 to 26 is where we all feel comfortable. It's kind of like what's outside today. But public spaces, we can tolerate up to 32 degrees, which is the moderate heat stress. We don't expect the public spaces to be at 26. But anything about that, the strong, very strong, and extremely strong heat stress, it's very hard for us to be out in the public spaces. So how do we ensure that the public spaces stay within the comfortable range so we can actually have people outside using these spaces? And this is an annualized UTCI. You can see that from roughly up to April, and again, starting from April to October, it's very difficult. Your conditions are either extremely hot, extremely difficult heat stress that is in the public spaces. So we, for the purposes of the exercise, to take one step at a time, we've chosen the months of May and October, as we call them, as shoulder months. So if we can add 2 months to the calendar that people can be outside beyond the 4 or 5 months, we will have basically started to get people out in that 20% extra health and wellness that the Grand Challenges talked about. And then hopefully we can get to the rest of the months later by this learning. And also focusing on the morning and the evenings, a lot of the shade usually is focused on mid-afternoon. Again, most public spaces, you don't see people in the mid-afternoon, but in the mornings they're going to work, in the evening they're leaving from work. So let's make sure that we're not leaving those times out and get a coverage during these times towards the entire part of the day. So in order to improve this, we looked at the past. Obviously, there have been a number of examples, but one example I point out are the ones on the right-hand side. You see the body of water, shallow body of water. If you take a shallow body of water and put it in the sun, it's not going to do you any favors. It's going to heat up, it's going to make the space hotter. But if you put it in a courtyard like this, with the way the wind is manipulated, shadow is manipulated, that body of water can actually improve the comfort even more. So it's not like there's a silver bullet answer for any material and any attempt, but how do you combine this with other elements and layer it to get the right kind of effect? But if you use singular results, you're not going to get there. We also looked at the nature. Desert snail is a great example, highly reflective surface. It's rejecting the heat, and there is a convection that happens underneath the body of the snail that allows for the air to go in and cool the body and keeps the body inside very cool. So how can we learn from these systems in thinking about the public spaces is what we focused on. So ultimate message for us is that deploy these as combinations. You obviously have shading, humidity, air, and radiation, but you can't deploy just the shade and call it a day. You have to combine it. And she's saying 5 minutes. I haven't even gone through halfway, so let me jump through. So there is science and there is the guidance. Let me just go through the pilots, because that's more interesting. So we looked at 2 pocket parks. One is a high density right outside DMT, a mosque plaza, which is a medium density, and an urban intersection. Again, it's not just about science. You have to make these beautiful to attract people. Understand the orientation. Abu Dhabi is at 45 degrees to cardinal angles. Don't forget that architects and designers are used to having the plots parallel to the sheets, and then you forget the orientation. Abu Dhabi tricks you tremendously. So keep the orientation in mind, and the wind is actually coming through the same orientation. Pocket Park, E25 Plaza. I need to get some time because it's slowing down. Just kidding. So these are the conditions that we are finding. So the canopy is something that we first focused on. Again, if you put a canopy on top, noontime good. Sickas, great examples. They cover you during the shoulder times, but not during the noontime. But the walls act pretty well. So what if we combine the two and we came up with this kind of a vertical shading that hangs from the top as opposed to horizontal shading? And we also learned from our engineers through a lot of testing that shading that stays overnight is actually going to heat up the space because it's trapping heat, that the shading needs to go up at night. So we came up with this idea that these roller shades, just like with window blinds, they drop down during the day and they go up at night to cool the spaces at night. And we actually have evidence that showed if you don't go up versus go up, what the UTCI is in the morning. Huge improvement if the shade goes up overnight to cool the spaces. Again, we played with the walls, and this is the composite that we came up with. Again, it's not single move. Working with the high albedo floor, night cooling for the shades to go up. We played with the walls, seating as well as the landscape together, combined in a certain capacity, but also introducing periodically some misting in a very strategic manner. If you did nothing and put misting in the space, it's not going to do anything, it's going to evaporate. So you need to deploy it very carefully when you can protect the space. So this is the plan of the plaza, but I'm going to do your construction. That's the site. Choosing the right materials for the ground. The idea of the landscape and the seating combined together, working together as a system. SLA will tell you, Rasmus, green is 10 degrees cooler than any surface, so that's going to provide cooling. Walls, and then deploying the canopies very minimally. We did reverse engineer the shadows to make sure that we're deploying canopies only those places where the site is exposed to sun, but not the entire site, because we don't want to have a place that is filled with a canopy. That's not interesting, right? So, and then these deep shadows, actually, you can see are providing great amount of a shade. It's going slow again, sorry. And then at night, it can be a beautiful space. You can see the sky and the stars. And the sun can get in, and here's the view. And you see the misting in a very controlled manner. It's provided where people are. It's not everywhere and anywhere, so we can actually improve the thermal comfort. So as a result, we started with a KPI requirement of 4 to 5 degrees UTCI, but we ended up at 10 a.m. in October of up to 10 degrees in some spaces, UTCI reduction, so no thermal stress. Afternoons are tough because the heat is building up. We're able to get to moderate heat stress, which is very comfortable. So, all right, I'm doing good, 3 minutes, yes. The Mosque Plaza, different problem here. Actually, you have a low density. You don't have these crazy buildings heating up the space because the buildings are not helping you in the urban environment. The spaces are heating up. They're 10 degrees warmer. But here it's less of a problem because the buildings are smaller. So this is also a community space. Similar approach, but different set of materials and elements. Again, a canopy, exact same canopy, oriented slightly different to the program. In the cardinal direction, we chose some materials that are pretty appropriate. But in this case, we actually introduced a body of water in the middle that really helped us, again, improve the thermal comfort. If you would have put the body of water on the right-hand side, we wouldn't have gotten that comfort. With these layering of elements from the canopy to the seating, the landscape, and then putting the water in the middle, again, here we are able to see 6-degree reduction at 10 a.m. in October and 10 degrees in the evening. Remember, this space is not as hot as the DMT Plaza is because the buildings are not radiating as much heat here. So even though it looks like a smaller number, 6 degrees, it's actually a good improvement. Again, back to no thermal stress as well as the moderate heat stress during the... So here's a video of how that affects shows. On the right-hand side, you see the time. The blinds are down, and you see the continuous shadow even at noontime because of the vertical shading. We actually don't have horizontal shading. And at night, the shade's rolling up and they're sort of taking advantage of the night sun. So, and the last thing is urban intersections. We all know these are the most hostile places anywhere. In Abu Dhabi, pedestrians wait there for 1 to 3 minutes. We took a different strategy here. As people are waiting, we still want the night cooling, we still want the shading, but these are really tough locations. We didn't want to do anything to sort of rolling shades and mechanical. So we took a slightly different approach. which is to create these vertical shading devices that cut off the sun, low angle sun, but they're angled in such a way that they can also protect you from the noontime sun. And we were inspired again by the Sadhu pattern and used the ropes as a way of actually creating these panels. And again, all of these we're looking at pilots, so we can multiply these small, medium, large. And here is an example of what that looks like in combination with landscape. So 9-degree reduction in October at 10 a.m. and 4 degrees in the evening. Again, the time of use is very different. This is, you're not expecting people to stay here for too long, so we can deal with a little bit more, little bit less comfort compared to some of the pocket parks. And this is a night view at the end. Thank you.
Kishore, thank you, thank you. Right, panelists, can I start with you, please?
So thanks a lot for this wonderful presentation. I found myself very inspired while listening to you. I was thinking of maybe combining the different projects that are to be in Abu Dhabi through a green network in order to form a green network. What I mean is, I think that when it comes to producing comprehensive solutions against the summer heat, it does not only suffice to redo public spaces or specific crossings. It is even more important to connect all these new spaces with each other with tree alleys, and in this way actually create a green network altogether that will help people and motivate people to use their feet. So the first thing I would like to give as a feedback is that I think it's very important not to concentrate on specific projects, but to always see to it that you create a network, a green network. The second issue I would like to mention is with regard to the heat islands. I mean, I find the work on the ground wonderful, and to be honest, I have nothing actually to add to this, up to one specific little thing that I will say in the end. But you mentioned it yourself, it's about the buildings that actually are one of the main reasons why heat islands are created. Now, I know that it is very difficult to retrofit buildings. It's not an easy decision. But I would not like to have left it unspoken, the fact that it might be a good idea to also add 2 to 3 pilot projects in terms of how buildings can be retrofitted, in terms of adding shading constructions on the fronts so that they do not actually produce so much heat themselves. Because I think I don't need to get any deeper into this, but all these glass fronts are actually exactly the opposite of what should be done in a place like Abu Dhabi. And the last but not least small addition. When it comes to the third project, this crossing, I find the idea with the shading wonderful. Why not try to add at least at one of these alleys that are being created, water, in terms of, I don't know how to translate it in English, but we call it a humidity fog. So the shading constructions that you are actually producing could actually also give out water, and this may be an addition that would make a huge difference. Well, thanks.
Sharifa.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentations. It's very inspiring, I have to say. Now, since I am part of the community and I work closely with individuals with special needs, as we call them in the UAE, people of determination, we need to consider a design that will look into the universal design. They always say the best designers are engineers that designs projects for all. So I understand, as you said, like it's a design, it's quick, people are there 1 to 2 minutes, but for individuals that, for example, on the autism spectrum disorders, waiting for them is such a big issue. So do consider these kind of constructions when we are considering spaces and parks around the UAE, around Abu Dhabi, is that we consider people that have, in the UAE, we have nearly 16,000 registered people with disabilities, which come under different types of abilities. It comes under visual, hearing, physical, intellectual, autism spectrum disorder as in its own, as well as multiple disabilities. So we need to consider, I understand we're focusing on, and it's well reflected throughout the pictures, laborers and workers working outside, but we are also looking into the leisure activities and the quality of life of these people that have these kind of challenges. So it's wonderful, the equipments that you've been used is very safe, because safety is a priority when we are including individuals, integrating them and supporting them to be integrated in the society, in our community. And I know a lot of families that are looking for a safe place that is well designed, that there are places that are cool, as well as places that are calm, to just in case the child, the individual is overwhelmed with all the traffic and the noises and the lights and the colors, but also to consider that some of them, and many of them actually, there's a huge population of that in the UAE that would love to be part of the community and be part of the artwork and the sport works that's around in the UAE. However, some places might be not the best places to be around due to maybe not accessing resting places, because 1 minute of them waiting, it's like for us 40 minutes wait. And so this consideration is very important, as well as safety, especially as we're talking about spaces around traffics, around where areas are not enclosed. It's great to see urban planning in between buildings, which is really great, but we want to make it functional as well. Not just sitting there, but also making it more interactive to build skills. We want to make the community to be integrating these kind of building those skills, I think so.
Thank you, Sharifa. And Andrew?
Yes, thank you. That's fantastic sort of exemplary analysis of the sort of climate issues. One thing I would have been interesting to start with, it would be a comparison between a tree-shaded space and an open space, because it seems to me that the trees, shade trees, are a fundamental part of a story that comes here, and I wonder whether there's a way of sort of beginning to integrate some of these things more. So you have these structures that obviously create instant shade, provided at the same time with trees that in 10 years are going to give that same shade, when your structures may be starting to need severe maintenance and all those sort of things, because it's a sort of there's clearly, as soon as you introduce mechanical things into these, it becomes a bit of an issue. But I mean, it's very exciting to see the idea that actually you can start to add identity to Abu Dhabi through a language of shade structures, as long as that is disciplined. And it's not just free for all, wherever you go, it's another different design. There's something really quite interesting about being disciplined about it, and how you use colour in different places, how you begin to use this in subtle ways through the city, so that it becomes of Abu Dhabi and not somewhere else.
Trust the landscape architect to say that, right? But I'd have to completely agree. I think that it would have been nice to see continuous biodiversity, and how do you try and integrate landscape and shaded trees in and amongst the structures. And I do have this kind of natural fear of things going wrong with the mechanics, especially in such a dusty environment. But what I was really heartened by was the fact that you looked at the sikas and self-shading, which I think is fantastic. And I can imagine that it could be really wonderful to be walking onto these places and seeing the screens come down. I think it's a great opportunity then to start to intertwine art, and maybe that could be like an updated thing as you see these screens coming down, and it tells you a bit of a story about the place, whether it's cultural or whether it's about innovation. to plug what we're doing here at the World Urban Forum, clearly. And I think that would be really, really, truly remarkable and make it sort of rooted to the place. So thank you very much. I'm conscious that I've got about 30 seconds to go, and so I really want to wrap this one up. And can we just give a round of applause, please, to Kishore? Basically, that gives a millisecond to get Rasmus up onto the stage to start his presentation. And yes, Rasmus Astrup, we welcome you. Can we have a round of applause, please, for Rasmus?
So, that's started well. Okay. You were just talking a little bit about trees before, and you can see how trees are part of the great environment. That's why I've called my lecture "Cool Landscapes and City Nature." Of course, it's because it's mega cool in terms of the design, but it's actually also cooling you down. This nurse, she's on her way to do a surgery in a hospital. Instead of passing a conventional parking lot, she's passing nature. Why is that important for this discussion? It's important because we want her to feel the nature in this little pocket. We want her to feel comfortable, to hear a bird, because she calms down and then she becomes a better nurse. This is some of the purposes of city nature for people. We have done exercises and investigations in Denmark that it's actually mega important to be in contact with nature. Kids needs it. Human beings needs to be in contact with nature. We need students to be in contact with nature because then they actually become more clever because they have better thoughts. And of course we need the citizens of Abu Dhabi also to be in contact with nature. There is a nature, but a lot of the nature here is green. Green is just a color, remember that. So what is it? It has to be stronger. We need to do something because cities has a major impact on the globe. I don't want to go into a discussion about CO2, but if you look at the footprint of the cities and the impact, it's enormous. This is a UN convention. There's SDG goals that we all need to consider today and here. If you look at the impact, maybe the last one is actually the biomass, which is the fundament for all of us. There's money up here. That's something we just invented to count and value things. But in reality, the biomass, without that, there's no world. So consider this. This is part of our contribution to cities, that we need to go away from this disconnection between city and nature, and we need to combine it. We need to use the plants cleverly, just as Kishore mentioned. We need to see it as an ecosystem, that the trees and the buildings, they actually help each other. This is a synergy for people, for plants, for thermal comfort, and so on. It's really slow, this one. Now I get why you was struggling with it. So there's several reasons for that. It's not just the microclimate. You know, there's these utility values you see on the left side. You know, there's a thing where we can have a CO2 reduction and the air quality and all that, but there's also an amenity value. There's a thing about feeling, the feeling we get when we are out in nature. It needs to be there. I actually believe that nature is every country's culture. And that's some of the things that we are trying to embed in this great initiative here in Abu Dhabi. And this is just some examples. I have to speed up so I don't lose time here, but trees can really increase a lot of things. This is how we had a project in Copenhagen. It's an international headquarter, and they said they want biodiversity. So this is the Finnish project. Because if you want biodiversity, you need dead trees. Otherwise, there's no biodiversity. So all these high stem trees with lawns has nothing to do with biodiversity. So in this location, on this project, the trees lay there, they're rotten, they become to soil, there's insect, there's mosses, there's a lot of things. So every day the guys walk around there because we want them to be, the highest asset for every company is the employees. The highest asset for every city is the people that live there. So here, we are creating a nature park for a big company. We even planted trees in the middle of the path, so you can't stressfully walk with your iPhone because then you hit the tree. You need to sense nature. You need to feel it when you walk from one meeting to another because it's important. It's a value. In Paris, we are working with projects. It even made the front page of National Geographic. We are actually cleaning air with plants. We can reduce 50% of air pollution. That's how clever nature is. So we have filters that we drag in and then reduce pollution out of the air. Nature is so clever. So when I had to go here 5 years ago, I had this idea about UAE. It's something fake in the desert. I don't know if you read this cartoon, but a second after the Captain Haddock, he jumps in the sand because it's not there. So what is Abu Dhabi? Actually, we discovered there is something here. This is the GAF tree. This is the national tree. This tree loves to grow in the desert. It has roots that grows 30 meters away from the stem. It can actually survive here, and it's a part of the biodiversity. So we started to investigate the local nature here. We discovered that it's much richer. There's a biodiversity. We discovered that there's a whole system. We discovered there's mangrove here. The most beautiful nature is actually just outside of Abu Dhabi. And it's part of the whole ecosystem of the city. And we need to protect it. We need to show it and we need to love it. But we didn't have enough knowledge. So we actually spent a year mapping all the species voluntarily here in Abu Dhabi to be able to work with the plants. There is around 700 local species here. We mapped them because we wanted to understand how they grow, not individually, but actually also together. Because if you don't treat them as habitats, you will not make a sustainable landscape. So we understand where they grow, how they grow. There's a lot of water in the underground here in Abu Dhabi. It's just salty. So it would be great to have that in mind when you start to design the landscapes. Basically, we also had to look at water. You know, it's around 10% of the water consumption is irrigation. So that plays a big role in this strategy that we had made. There's a lot of dust storms here. You can actually use the right species in the right combination to avoid that. It's a big issue here. So we need to change people understanding, not just how it looks, but also how it feels. It's not smart to do paved areas with a few palm trees. We need to do differently. Well, you know, when trees evaporate, they actually drag energy out of, they use energy and they cool down the temperature. So, you know, we can use trees so cleverly. So this initiative in the Gadan 21 has 4 things that I would like to show and focus on. It's the local species, but I think it's very importantly also how we mix them in habitats, how they actually support each other, the trees. And there's an irrigation that needs to be smarter. And then we have also investigated soil. You know, this country has no soil. It only has sand. So how can we deal with that? How can we prove that? There's not a lot of water. What happens if you water? If you've tried when you were playing with sand as kids, would you put water in sand? What happens? It just disappears, right? So how can we work with that? If we don't secure all these elements, we cannot do it fully sustainable. So it's a whole system that we need to focus on. We need to understand these species. We need to put them together in a smart and clever way. I have 5 minutes, okay, that was not a lot. We need to combine them in these habitats. It's similar to what Kishore just mentioned, because it is a system. We need to update our irrigation system. We need to add things to the sand. Here it's a company called Seal Plant where we can actually reduce the water a lot. So all these elements are put together, increasing the quality and the lowering the need of irrigation. And then it's getting built now, that vision, into one of many projects, and that is my ending here. It's called Al Reem Forest, the coolest place in town for many reasons, and it's actually under construction, so I will just do that in less than 5 minutes. It's a project on an island that is called Reem Island, And when we started as a designer, you always try to find something that is there, you know, a starting point, something, a history, a DNA, something you can catch to and find as a starting point for your innovative thinking. There was nothing there. It was just an empty site. What we discovered was there was a topography. It is actually excavated, so it's like a future basement. So that topography came the starting point of our idea. Let's just take a benefit out of that. Let's make a park that is using that topography, because also in terms of microclimate, it is good to be lower on the ground. So it actually has a cooling effect. So we just carve out this activity because it was, as a fixed program, it had to be an activity park. And then we had a forest around it. And of course, when you say a forest here, it's not a forest like where I come from in Denmark. We have snow right now, so it's different from here. But it's a forest of the feeling you get of being in forest. And there's no lawns here. This is a park without any lawns. So it's a very different expression that people are used to. It's only local species. So obviously, it's going to be interesting how people will react to it, and secondly, we also need to think about how to maintain it. That's another discussion for the future. I have 3 minutes. Thank you. Here you can see the park, that you are actually walking in the forest. So the path is actually cut out of that forest, and it's on purpose that we have a topography here where we use the highly dry, you know, the strong desert trees. They are actually on the highest points, and the more demanding palm trees are in the low points, because water still moves according to the topography. So we tried to cleverly use the topography with the local habitats. So it's all linked together. This is a visualization of the park, and this is the trees, the GAF trees from the nursery. This is a nursery here in Abu Dhabi. They are now getting planted in the park, so we are now getting a lot of GAF trees into the site. And this is the system we are starting. I saw a bird at the construction site yesterday sitting in a GAF tree. So this whole ecosystem is now kick-started. It's not a lot of different species, but it will give a feeling of a forest. We have, of course, also considered the materials. So we have the high reflection, so we can cool down the area. And then basically, the framework for this whole park is the nature. So it creates the shade, it creates the nice microclimate, and it creates a very urban environment that is needed. You can see here the people that walks inside. There will be a forest track. It's also something that is a little inconvenient here. It's a little dangerous. You have to walk on the stepping stones in there. It's not a very normal situation to find. So we want people to engage as much as possible with the nature. And of course, in nighttime, it's going to be light up to a complete new situation. Thank you.
Rasmus, thank you very much. Can I start with Sharifa, please?
I think it's wonderful. Thank you so much, Rasmus, for this wonderful presentation. One thing that really caught my eye was the education part, and I think that is important to maintain and educate our generation with regards to our local plants. And this is important in regards to even for schools to be able to access these kind of parks. You know, I think that was very interesting that you integrated that part within the project. One thing also that was a question you asked, and I also was asking about it, was the maintaining part. I think that is going to be really challenging with the temperatures that we have here, and just the accessibility of it. What happens during the summertime? Will it just get lost? Will people forget about it? You know, so these kind of questions that kept on coming to my mind. Yeah, and then the next one was the engagement in nature. You know, that is important because many people miss that part where, you know, before our ancestors, accessing to nature was everything. We all hear about nature and the different plants that are available that is now very far from where the city is. But now what I see is that you're getting this back. You're making them engage in nature and understanding it. And again, the same point I would like to point out here again is to ensure that it's a universal design, that we consider it's a park for all. Thank you.
Andrew.
Rasmus, that was fantastic. Thank you. Shows the power of landscape architecture. I think it also showed that there has to be a fundamental new way of thinking about landscapes in Abu Dhabi. The way it's been done for the last 30 years or so is not worked. And this is showing how you can make it a more humane, livable city to contact with nature. The grey to green is a sort of a global movement at the moment in lots of cities, certainly in Europe anyway, to take highway spaces, hard spaces, and turn them into green spaces. And I think Abu Dhabi has the opportunity, if they go with this in a really fundamental way, to sort of really sort of put a global exemplar out there to sort of show how we can really make our cities much more beautiful, nature-filled and attractive to live in.
Thank you. Maria.
Well, thanks, Rasmus, for a wonderful presentation and a project that actually touches my heart because it combines the idea of a forest with urban elements. Now, I would have said, use grown-up trees and start growing trees now, but I've seen that it's there already. What we did not have enough time to see is if you have introduced facilities for play. And when I'm talking about facilities for play, I don't mean only children, I mean also the parents. Because the whole idea is to get people on their feet, right, and to have them using these places. And Copenhagen is a wonderful example of redoing places and introducing play facilities also for the parents, so that they will spend more time there and it gets more fun for them. Now, the rest of my feedback has to do with the municipality, as a matter of fact. I just wanted to say, please remember that you need maintenance concepts, you need to create capacity building, so that means that you need staff that should be actually trained now so that they're there when you need them. And one last thing, I think that this is, also create capacity building in terms of giving this knowledge to local engineers and planners. I think this is also very important. And one last thing, it is wonderful, but it's surrounded by motorways. So what about walking access there? This is always an issue, right? That's all, thanks.
Can I ask anybody from the audience if they have any questions? I'd be loving to hear some of your comments. Sir, the guy in the grey suit there.
All right, so I've got a query. I'm actually quite impressed that Abu Dhabi's progressed with these urban greening initiatives, because I used to live and work here 10 years ago, and back then both the government and the consultants were all supporting this. We were providing the design of it, governments were asking for it. I come back 10 years later, I haven't seen much of what we proposed built, but now I see Green Forest and then For Abu Dhabi and urban beautification. So a big part of what interests me is the institutional changes or the policy changes or government changes that have allowed this to happen, whereas 10 years ago it didn't happen. We were advocating for shading, we were advocating for eco-landscaping as part of the mitigation measures. The government wanted it, but it didn't get implemented, and now they are. So I want to ask those who are involved in the design, as well as the the various departments in the government, as to what's changed between 10 years ago and 10 years now to allow these projects to actually move ahead.
That's a tough question.
Can you hear me? Because I'm actually having this. Okay. I only been here for 5 years, so I cannot answer the 10-year span. But I think it's just because it's they understood that it is the only solution, right? In terms of sustainability and culture-wise and microclimatic, it's the only solution. And right now, there is, we discussed that yesterday as well, that I don't want to take the boldness out of the great initiative that Abu Dhabi is doing, but I think there is a competition between cities globally to be more attractive, and a way to be attractive for a city is by creating a mega cool urban space. This is actually how you make it. This is how you create livability. So I think that is led by this initiative, but the level they're doing here compared to other clients that I have, and I'm not saying that just because it's my client, is really awesome. It's really, we are using the local species. The maintenance is going to be an issue, but you know what you should do with the maintenance? This much. Because it's nature, you should actually not maintain it. You should not mold the lawn. You should not cut it down. You should leave it as it is, and then you should secure accessibility for all kind of people that needs to be there. But besides that, the project I showed in Novo Nordisk, where there was a dead tree, we walk around with the maintenance guy in 3 years, 3 times a year. So suddenly maintenance is not a description, here maintenance is a manual, and then you have to look down. It's not like that. Maintenance is a discussion between people, and you discuss the development of it.
Can I just wrap up? We basically got about a couple of minutes before we move on to, as I said, Dr. Barbara Römer's 7 million slides. What I find absolutely amazing by the scheme is the fact that you have used words like cool and livable, and it all feels very, very qualitative. But at the heart of this also is something that is truly quantifiable. For me, I look at it and it's almost like a Lego kit of parts. You're assigning values, environmental values, whether it's carbon sequestration, water retention, temperature reduction, that can be quantified, and you can put together these different species to enhance the environmental benefits for the people. So I think that's truly admirable, and not a metal canopy in sight. And I'm not taking anything away from you, Kishore. I think that what you did was fantastic. But what I do like is the fact that they are natural canopies, and you can see the immediate environmental benefits of that. So thank you very much. And we are on to... first of all, let's give a round of applause, please, for Rasmus one more time.
Just on the question of policies as well. Back a few years ago, I would say 8-10 years ago, the Istidama policies came online, and now with the progression of the years, we have seen where things can be improved, what we can do better. And fortunately, within the team for Abu Dhabi, alongside Rasmus and CBT and the other teams, we've worked to even do better than that. And the speed of which we were developing on, there's times we have accelerated in other things, and today we are fortunate enough to have the For Abu Dhabi efforts and the projects to progress towards this, and especially towards art. I was never a person that was interested in art, I'll be frank, but under the For Abu Dhabi I saw how taking art out to the streets, and I won't say too much, Barbara will cover that, brought so much more value to the people and so much more awareness. And I think that's what happened. There is awareness, and as Rasmus said, awareness changed, and with that comes attention, and with that comes care.
You better get up on stage very quickly, because I know we're going to be blasted.
I have no time.
So,
can you hear me?
Dr. Barbara, after you.
Yes, excellent. All right, I really need this clicker to work, otherwise I'm in trouble. So I'm going to be the voice of arts and culture on this panel, and I'm going to be going very fast. I'm speaking about the For Abu Dhabi initiative, and I want to always start with this slide, because that's really what we're doing here today. We're thinking about urban planning, and I'd like to start with this statement: let's not create another global city, but a local city with global appeal. And that is what I firmly believe in. So I want to show you a couple images, Kasal Hos in the beginning of this emirate, and kind of give you a sense of what we're looking at. Make this look like Abu Dhabi and not any other place in the world. And that's really at the core that I talk to as the first discussion I have with any artist about the curatorial strategy. How are you capturing al-sadu? How are you capturing fish weaving, coffee making, etc.? And then I talk about local anchoring. How do we actually make the sites specific? How do you create arches that reflect the nature? El-Cid sculptures that capture the calligraphy. these kind of hibikozo sculptures, they're lanterns that seem very appropriate. And so that's really the journey we're on, is trying to find expression. But then we were thinking about what does it mean to add color, city color, because this is a very typical Abu Dhabi picture. So taking a look, this is not localized, Olafur Eliasson, right? When you see this, what can this do to a city to actually bring joy, bring color? What this does in Argentina, right? You're taking a place that is gray and sad, and you're suddenly adding and lifting it, and you're lifting the spirit. This in Korea, this in New York, playing with the idea of a water tower. So it's a reinterpretation of spaces. New Orleans, Cobra's edition there. Now this on a very, very big scale. So this is Cobra, biggest mural in the world in Brazil, painting all the ethnicities. So somebody who celebrates humanity, peace, understanding. These are the immigrants of Ellis Island, just a couple blocks away from where I live. So the first thing we actually did is, this is what I'd seen. This is the Abu Dhabi initiative by the Community Development Department, and so together with Abu Dhabi, it was these faces that fascinated me, because I think we all have a stereotype of what somebody from here looks like. And then I saw that little black girl and the German woman, and so we went to Cobra and said, could you paint the faces of Abu Dhabi? So 20 meters high, 70 meters wide, an entire building is wrapped with all these faces that are all residents here, that are the faces of Abu Dhabi. And then we went, okay, we can have hidden little surprises like Ernest Zakarevich, who creates joy in these little moments, which just brings joy and so on to Penang and that neighborhood. So Ernest came over in October. We said, can you start by painting 2 little Emirati girls? It's just a little ad, it's a little surprise. And so there you are, and I want to just tell you this story. I was there while I was painting. You see the one girl isn't finished. And that little girl, and they were very shy, the one in pink, and I always try and be smiley, and I go over and said, so do you like this? And she was nodding, said yes. And then she pulled my sleeve, and then she whispered, and she just looked at it and said, I want to be a painter. And it was really a recognition at that moment. It still moves me to tears. It really moved me, what it did to that girl. They had never been painted before here. So I think let's rethink how we're seeing people, how we're giving voices. So we're rethinking school perimeters, right? This is a typical Abu Dhabi school perimeter. Inside they're actually quite colorful if you go, and wonderful. But on the outside, to my European American eye, they look like detention centers or prisons. And so we said, can we rethink what schools are like? So this is a teacher, actually, a Zimbabwean who lives in Lausanne, who started to create these beautiful, very simple illustrations that are also climbable sculptures. We're right now working with Acrylicers out of London that have met with the teachers and students and principals, and this is going on right now. If you want to go there, just ask me. I'll point it out on the map. It's 1 kilometer long, 3 schools, their perimeters being painted. And this is all, this school wanted aviation as a theme, right? So we're talking to the teachers, and it's being incorporated in the designs. The idea being that then we will work with the school going forward. We can do art and sports, right? In improving in health, movement, mobility, getting people out into the street, climbing. And so art can be a way of pulling that, like this skateboard by Okuda. Then I just want to say some general words about sustainability, because I think art is really playing a role there now, and it's very important. So I like to think of artists as PR agents for sustainability. What do I mean? Like Nela Azevedo, who has Melting Men, who are talking about climate change, right? Olafur Eliasson with his Ice Watch in London, who placed glacial ice in front of the Tate Modern to raise awareness. Lorenzo Quinn, who so presciently predicted the flooding of Venice in 2019 by virtual flood, but also predicting water levels over Amsterdam, right? Wolfgang Butchers, who's warning about the decline of bees with his beautiful hive out of Kew Gardens in London. This, my own example, a pavilion where the 4 seasons live simultaneously. So you can walk from spring into summer, autumn, winter, all at 0 carbon. So this is completely carbon neutral. Yes, this clicker does not work. There we go. And this is a carbon neutral experience. So also highlighting what you can do. Ai Weiwei, who's celebrating bicycle, nostalgia of actually going back to that, moving around. And this is the one in London. And I'm very pleased that this artist has loaned this for the World Urban Forum. And you can actually see it on the Corniche, the first time to be seen in the Middle East. So please invite you to go up there while you're here. And then I'd like to make the point that livability and sustainability means walkability. When we move around, it's so important. This is another example from my own backyard. This is the High Line, a 2.3 kilometer green elevated walkway that 7 million people go to every year to visit. But what do? They go from artwork to artwork to artwork. Now that's not new. The first wooden footbridge, 1333, Luzern, Switzerland. What is there? Inside of this tourist attraction, 158 paintings dating to the 17th century, not dissimilar to the Long Walk in Beijing, the Summer Palace, 14,000 paintings. So can we take that idea, and that's why I love Jason's comments about potentially painting the climate intervention. You could enter art that way. Emmanuel Moreau does this in modern times, right? The 100 colors, more abstracted, but that's exactly what she's doing, telling stories. The same with Mark Fornes, who we're lucky is in the room today, who's also teaching about play and shelter with parametric architecture that is helping on the climate intervention as well. And Olga for Elias, and you get the sense with colorful shading can do. It can be art, it can be inviting. Daniel Beren in Paris, right? So we can be much more imaginative. Think about reimagining the underpasses, the digital spaces through TeamLag, an artist like Refik Anadol out of Turkey. I really think that one should think about bringing art to the streets. I talk about this incessantly. I think we should have the exhibitions outdoors, like France teaches us. Like here, Reza is giving a talk about his photographs along the Seine, but here's also an exhibition in Afghanistan. So I think let's think about spaces in a very different way. This is a library. It's a little pop-up library that you can go to. It locks at night, you can close it, right? So why can't we be a little bit more loose about what buildings do? So I'm inviting us all to take art to the street through Yuri Suzuki or other ways of engaging with the community, making it playful, getting people to move. And I think for me, the art is placing them that you go from one to the next is a big part of it. So trying kids to be active, and I have 5 minutes, and sorry, and Carlos Cruz Diaz is somebody who I think was really the godfather of bringing color to the street. So he's actually painting on the street, art crossings, right? Getting people excited to walk. And that's what we're exploring now with Adam Nathaniel Furman, who is kind of a young Carlos, who does that again through color. Or Camille Willala, who's come, and she's also thinking about art crossings. So we're challenging these artists to come along, but very important to me and dear to my heart is that this is diverse. I'm not saying it's easy, men at work it is, but we are inviting women. And there's even women muralists we're having out. This is Tarsila Schubert at the Delma Street crossing, which you might drive by. This is her working right there. And right now on Airport Road, you will look up, and this is going on. This is Mad C out of Germany, a woman, fearless, who's actually not comfortable with heights, but is up there on the 17th floor painting away. Please, a little plug for the art tour. Come along. We will show you. We'll take you. You can meet her. So that is right now happening here. And very important, the person who most moved me this last couple months, Elian, a little person who came, who is the boldest, most giant man I've ever met. He is fearless the way he goes at these buildings, and he has brought color to that area that I was just moved by, at frankly the fighting his health in order to do this art. So I would say, apart from showing off world-class artists to show the standard that can be done, we need to amplify local artists. So this is beloved, revered Mohammed Ahmed Ibrahim, first-generation UAE artist. We invited him to paint this building. He came there and he became very quiet. He was a little bit, I could tell he wasn't quite comfortable, and he said, how am I going to do this awning? This is a huge canopy. And said, Mohammed, just trust us. We'll help you, we'll support you, we'll make this happen. So how we made it happen, we brought in Gaia, an American muralist who does scale and he works with communities. So we matched those two up, and that is him. And he later told me he's scared of heights. And there he is with Gaia together in the boom lift. And I saw him that day and he was giddy and he was like, I'm dancing on air. So, you know, it is incredible what was created there. And they brought color to that community. And they also, at the same time, built a friendship. So how beautiful is that? So the next step of what we're doing is we're now developing local artists. This is somebody who's never sketched on that scale. We're now working with him to be able to bring that. So that is the next wave for us. It is workshops. This is is Momo giving a workshop. This is Cobra teaching. So it's really us always now when we approach artists saying, can you engage locally? Can you teach people? Are you willing to show how you do this? And then having those kind of workshops. Then the next step, where we're not quite yet, hopefully in a couple months, we'll have the real community involvement when we have enough people on the ground to do that. That the schools are part of it, like here, Boa Mistura out of Spain, that actually use their community to create these kind of oases in the cities, here in Spain, here in Mexico, that is a community doing their own community, which I think is so inspiring. So that is where we want to go, and we wish to end there. So I just say, from an art point of view, the strategy for a young city is to showcase the world's best, but have it be localized and site-specific, amplify your local artists, mentor the local talent, engage your community, and then celebrate it together. On that note, I invite you to come to the art tour, the bus tour that goes tomorrow, 12:30, and you can see all these sites that we've created. The other bus, I'm doing one bus, and the other bus is done by Evoca One, whose mural you see here, a 600-meter mural, who is running productions right now and will be on the road with us. And thank you very much. Do follow For Abu Dhabi. Bye-bye.
A whirlwind. Amazing. Okay, Andrew.
I'm still trying to catch my breath. I don't know about you. That was that. Sorry, is it on? Is that on? Yeah. Okay. Good. Astonishing. I'm just trying to think of some themes that are actually threading through, and what comes to me is actually something's gone dead again. Oh, it's okay. We're trying to. I mean, it's we talked about the grey to green in terms of the nature, but actually the grey to colour of what is the colour of this community is really fascinating, actually, and the exuberance of the scale. It'd be interesting to know your thoughts on the scale, because many of the pieces you showed were actually enormous. You know, they're building scale, and some little beautiful things. So it's how far do we have to go in terms of getting the balance right? I also think another thread that's come through all of the presentations is this thing about the human experience on the street as a person in walking through space, and how we can use all of these ingredients to actually enrich the environment of the city. And you know, I wish I could bring the artists that you've worked with to my city, to any city I work with, because I think all the cities in the world are actually crying out for this sort of touchstone of how we are as humans, and how we are creative, and how we actually want to make a mark about, look, this is an important part of, it's an important moment in the world's existence. We're all trying to find a way of how to respond to that, whether it's climate change, biodiversity change, cultural change, urbanization, and you know, there's the three things we've talked about this afternoon are all about just making that mark. So I'm blown away. Thank you.
Sharifa.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. I can't. I'm getting emotional right now. Thank you so much, really, Dr. Barbara, about this. And it was so interesting and inspiring to see that a project that can empower locals, and that's so important, I think, to get them more involved and give them the confidence that they can also be as artistic, as talented, and the world can see them as well. I think also it's important, and I'm here vocalizing the people of determination. Again, there's one message I hope when I'm getting out of here, everyone here would think about people of determination and how talented they are. And trust me, if you need artists, I can get you those artists, and they can do as great as this work as possible, and they would love to access those workshops. So definitely I would love to get in contact with you regarding that. I think also art in itself is so powerful to change perceptions and change a lot of way of thinking that could limit a lot of accessibility. I have to say. So I think subliminal messages throughout art is so important as well. I would love to see more of, being part of the voice of change of culture that we are looking into, integrating of people of determination and special needs, making it, normalizing it, if I have to say it politically correct, placing, equipments that are, that focuses on enhancing cognitive abilities, enhancing physical abilities, enhancing fine motor abilities. There are a lot of amazing equipments out there that you can install and are freely available for families. That probably an individual that need to work on their fine motor, on their gross motor, on their balance. And I love that there's an interactive play around different areas, which was really engaging. And to think about that design, to stimulate, kids, even children, to be able to put themselves in other people's shoes that might find that challenging, So it's all about stimulation of putting yourself in their shoes, looking into, there was this project which I loved, in which the kids would go into an area and experience someone that is visually impaired, let's say, or someone that has some kind of sensitivity in lights and how they see things, so embedding these things in the community can help push forward the perceptions of integrating special needs. And lastly, again, collaborating with NGOs and individuals that are artistic, but they don't know how to be part of the community, just so there's a platform for them, and not just to put them in four walls, but also to integrate in within the community. I think that just to push that, our boundaries, and thinking out of the box, literally out of the box, and not putting them like, oh, we're not specialized in special needs, that's not our job. These are for own special. No, it's not. It's actually everyone's responsibility. Thank you.
Maria?
Well, I'm amazed and moved. And as a matter of fact, I think this will be my new point of reference when having lectures all over the world. I will say, look at what's happening in Abu Dhabi. It's really a wow. So while you started presenting, I had noted down two things, and both of them are in there. The first one would have been, employ local artists and let them interact with international artists to create new inspiration. And this is exactly what's happening. And the second thing I had noted down is introduce it along walks, because once again, it's about walking and having people take long walks, and if there's interesting things to see along the way, we all go walking, as we all know. So this is also happening, so I wouldn't know what to add. I would just want to say a wow. And I think there's one last thing. I mean, we all know about the tremendously inclusive impact of art in public space, because it makes public space valuable, and it makes the place where people live actually valuable to them. So it can be actually be part of a campaign to create a sense of a new identity, togetherness, and taking pride of one's own living environment. And I think it has the strength to do so.
Lovely. You have a question, sir? Did you hear that, Barbara? If Abu Dhabi was a RAL tone?
I think there would be as many colors as many residents you'd ask, right? I mean, it's not for me to tell the color. So you need to know that yourself as well. There is, to some extent. There are some things I'm not at this point at a position to reveal. We are very inspired by Al Sadu weaving and the heritage red color, but you come back in a year or two.
Thank you for the question. I'm afraid so. I'm going to have to move on. But what I would like to say, Barbara, is that it's kind of encouraging to see this kind of shift away from the trophy art. You know, we go to so many cities around the world and you see that piece of art which is, it smacks of corporatism in many respects, and you think that, wow, some rich benefactor has put this here and we're all meant to stare at it and marvel at it. To see that element of engagement with the local community, onward stewardship and the passing of knowledge, I think is really, really quite remarkable. So good on you. I think that what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. And if we can try and also inspire through art to the story of climate change and sustainability, just like the stuff that you did with Carlo Ratti and in your sort of zero carbon pavilion, I think that's really important. I mean, whilst we are kind of educating the youth and they are naturally kind of embracing the green agenda, how can we ensure that kind of the older ones are actually also kind of embracing going truly green, deep green? So thank you. Can we have a round of applause, please, for Dr. Barbara Römer? Okay, we're doing amazingly for time. I'm amazed that you're all still awake, and that's because of the pace of this. I mean, you've all been really remarkable. So, you know, last but not least, Olga Gómez Fernandez. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Can you please step to the stage, please?
And I'm bringing a journey, and it's called a journey because we were given. Sorry. It was not a very small street. We were told it was called a street, but actually it was the road to the road. It was a small scale back in London. When we came here, I just could not believe. I said, oh my God, this is a highway. I mean, it's really wide. So some areas is 100 meters. The other areas are 80 meters, sometimes tight. But what is incredible is that we thought this is not really a walking street. It's actually designed by the car. Obviously this street is located, you know, by Casa Hosen. There is one of the most famous monuments in the area, and we went to a trip there. We love the landscape. I mean, it's very arid, it's very dry, but it complements Casa Hosen. And we read a little story about the actual fort, that it was created in the 1760, and it was this any jazz tribe, they used to come from the mountains to the sea. And the main idea, we were thinking, well, actually, can we not recreate that journey and maybe have the idea of having them to come through the road? Because in the sea, they used to come from a very inland land to come and trade, contemplate the sea, pearl trade. So we created that little sketch back in London and came back with this idea of a journey. And you always need to go to the past. As Rasmus said, you always try to find something on that side that is going to give you some guidance for your design. And this was our future. So the first sketches about that 6.23 kilometers of road, we were thinking, well, there's so many areas, it's so wide that there's a lot of canvas that we can use, many identified icons and things for people to locate along the road. So from the oasis and to the sea. So we created a color-coded road, that is the airport road, and we identified key elements for each of the things that maybe that tribe found along the journey. Actually, we thought about this little sketch that I really love, that is the journey of the Dhabi that you can see on the right-hand side, and all of the things, the wonderful things that he will find and encounter along the road until they get to the sea. So, given that, we provided some identity for all of these junctions that they felt all the same. So there's two areas. There's a linear park on the right-hand side, and there's the Etihad Square. They are very wide. They already allocate lots of the public space. And then there's the area in between, the junctions. Most of it is 8 lanes of road. But you have a wide area of junctions where there's not too much going on. So we thought we should just enhance those junctions. That's where people meet. So starting with Linear Park 1, we were surprised that there's actually a lot of landscape, but most of it is the green lawn. So it's not very local, and it's a lot of irrigation. I'm not a landscape architect, I'm an architect, so I didn't know anything about plants before I was involved, but I learned that this is not the local thing, and it needs a lot of water, so it's the right thing. This is Senusian plan that is the local, equal of these that is more relevant. But as you can see, either side of the road we had a lot of green area, but it was unused. It's not only that it's green, it's not that it's pleasing to the eye. There needs to be something where you can sit on, something to look at, and something to do. And so what we decided, we divided this area into 4 zones. There was a sculpture park, an oasis, a desert, and a sand dunes. And I'm taking you to the journey from this side. So you can see in here that we were trying to make it playful. We wanted people to go into these spaces and use them. So the first one we thought, well, desert, how can we replicate the desert? And this was a very 5-minute sketch, because these actually limestones, they are not in the desert. There's the limestone that eroded by the sea. But we were intrigued about creating some sort of recreation, modern interpretation of the desert. They will be playful, they will have like sinuous shapes. And it came this idea that why can we not have these areas by the road and have little pockets of not lawn, but actually local plants. And these local plants, kids can come and learn about them. We can have cactus, we can have everything that is local, that people can learn about this area. We also, in the oasis, the idea it was create like a body of water in shade, having enough trees either side, so it become like a pleasant walk. The amount of trees, and I learned that palms are not that good, forgive me, but we will have a mixture, because I have the look of the landscape, but we will have a mixture of plants, local plants, and most of it we wanted to create a shaded path, so you can walk either side of this body of water always in shade. We also put a pavilion. We wanted to have this little kiosk, because I think the parks, they should have some use, places to go and eat, sit, interact. But what happens between the desert and the park? And this is the question. We have the junctions, 100 meters by 100 meters, 10 minutes from one side to the other. And as you can see on the right-hand side, there are large areas of space that there's nothing to do. And when it's very hot and you're waiting, yes, you need to have some shade and some comfort. So what we did is trying to bring to the junctions some elements that provide identity. Each junction has a name. Each junction will have an icon, something they will know where you are, and people will be excited to come to the junction to actually interact with it. So from a gaff tree interpretation and a shaded device, from a lighter structure, or even the water junction. And for each of the junctions, we did a little sketch. We have even crazy ideas about having even water junctions, that the water come in and you will cross through the water, but that's a bit difficult technically, but still dreaming. So in the junctions, we wanted obviously people need to wait. And you wait 10 minutes, and in the heat it's quite difficult. So we wanted to have green walls with mist. Mist and green walls, they will surround you while you are in the shading area. But also at night, in the light, you need to find some wayfinding. So we have, in the desert, we have this desert sky, as we call it, where we use reflective materials, and we have lighting pavings that will guide you through. In the end, I'm just going to talk about Etihad Square, and we are arriving just close to the sea. Etihad Square there's a lot of landscape around it. There's monuments, there's things to look at, but unfortunately, there's not too much shade or shelter or protection. And even I was very sad to see that this big roundabout that is next to Etihad Square, it's being blocked off by a fence because people don't use it. And that highlights how can we make people encourage them to cross the street through the roundabout. So we came with this vision, and it was a hand sketch saying we have Casa Hoson at the top right, and then this area, why can we not make it a forest? Similar, but you can walk between the trees, because obviously people will have to walk across the roundabout. So we decided, like in Kew Gardens in London, to have an elevated path. We also wanted the idea, to link Casa Hoson, as you can see in the center, with Etihad Square, with some fresh body of water, with a tree walk, and arriving into another green area. But what happens is that we created 2 zones. So you have mangrove tree walk, the elevated path, and then Al Etihad Square. And both spaces, we want them to be together. is something important, you know, because this is the most touristic area. Actually, I was there, I've never seen so many buses of tourists, and they're struggling to cross from one side to another, and this is why we proposed the bridge. In terms of the tree walk, this is the roundabout at the moment. We took the photo, so it will look quite different because we will have to have all these trees and the elevated path. This is one of the visuals that will be inside of these spaces. And there's an opportunity to have poetry. There's things to do in each of these areas of the park. And I forgot to say that along the journey when we have in each of the spaces, there's going to be poetry and there's going to be things to look at. Mostly, hopefully, art from Barbara as well. So Al Ittihad Square. Well, when we walk there, it's actually interesting because it is quite plain and there's not too many people, but they have this little enclosure that we were quite curious, and it's a very pleasant space. Why it works is because it's lowered, because there's water, it's in shade, and most of the people that are congregating on that area. And the good thing is because this space has shelter and trees. So we decided, well, what if we combine some of the shelter with also, on the left-hand side, some activities? This Ittihad Square, we think we need a program, we need uses, we need people to be excited to come about. It cannot be just landscape. And this is why we came with a concept about how we're going to divide Ittihad Square. It's a very large space, and one of the concepts was actually we are close to the sea, so we call it the 7 islands. We divide it into 7 programs, and in each of them, there's something that you can go and do and look at. And if you bring your kids, as Maria was saying, there will be something for the parents too. Because, for example, in the park, we have a park at the beginning, we have a ground square, pavilions, events, and F&B. So planning the square itself is, we wanted to have enough amount of green, but we also have to have all these buildings. It's not buildings, it's actual pavilions of play where people can interact. So the mosques that are already there, next to them they will have a water fountain that will be for parents and kids, and either side of the mosque we have play areas for the kids. Then we have the Maritime Square, where there's a series of fountains that they are interactive, where people can vote for the theme of the year. They can also put their wishes. And we have this little pavilion inspired about the fort, the Yahili fort, and we thought it was very nice. Now that we are back to the sea, that at night people can walk inside and watch the stars. This is a view from Ittihad Square, and as you can see, there's an element that I haven't talked about, but it's that obelisk tower that we have in the end. When we came to the end, we came to the conclusion we have to have something to finalize, to celebrate the end of this road. And it's actually beautiful because you can watch it from the water. We can watch it either side. The buildings from the corniche, they are almost 100 meters away from the water. So this element will be seen everywhere, and it will become a landmark to start your journey. The tower itself is not actually a tower, it's a lighthouse. It's an observation tower. It's not very big, 10 stories, but it has the remembrance of the sailors. We want to inspire about the sails and about the fishing nets, and we want it to be very light and airy, but we want it to be not too tall, so you will lose people. You want to see people out there, that they come up there and they can look either side. It will be fantastic once you come out of this journey, that you come up to the tower and then you can look back into the top left side, back into your journey, but you can also look back and looking towards the sea. So the tower has two visions in the top level, and as you can see on the right hand side, the tower is on top of a fountain. The fountain acts like a shelter because this space we want it to be dual. It will be in summer, will be used when it's very, very hot. It's a water fountain where you can go inside and be sheltered. And when it's a good weather, you can be outside and look at the events pavilion from the amphitheater. Sorry. So this is the water fountain that we're proposing, where will be the royal poems. And this is just to summarize that I'm very, very late, the journey. So we believe that by having all of these little moments along this road and trying to create, shelter and space and activity and identity, we will encourage people to walk along the street. I think it should have a new name, no Airport Road, and it will be back to be called Sheikh Rashid bin Zayed Boulevard.
Olga, thank you. I mean, we've been a bit selfish over here. We've been sort of doing a lot of sort of peer reviewing up here, and there's only been a couple of questions from the audience. I'd like to throw it over to the audience now. Yes, please. Your name. Here.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Yep. So my name is Yomna. I was born and raised here in Abu Dhabi. So one of the things, or one of the comments that I want to have for Olga is that the Sheikh Rashid bin Al Maktoum Street has been a very important road for all of us. I personally call it Airport Road because it is the road that leads to the airport. But what I missed in your presentation, or what I missed in the experience, is that this particular road has a history to it. So I don't know how many people have been living in UAE or Abu Dhabi since the 19th, but there was a very important monument that was nostalgic to all the people who were born in the 90s, and it was the volcano fountain. And it's gone, vanished. But everyone you talk to will remember that volcano fountain. Everyone will remember the memories they had there. Also, again, one of the important things, or the history of the road, was that there used to be a procession. So when the tribe came to the coast, there was they used to go from the airport, from the coast, to the Qasr al-Hassan, because at that moment it was the symbol, or the first thing they see in Abu Dhabi. But then when the CFB came, there was a reason why their CFB is there. And then right opposite, in front of the CFB, means the Culture Foundation, sorry if I wasn't very clear. And then in front of the Culture Foundation there is a mosque, and after the mosque there's a Manhal Palace. So there's a series of elements that were there because of the history of the tribe movement on that road. So I'm just particular about how did the journey come along. Have you studied the history of the road progression, because it is very symbolic to the Abu Dhabi's growth and Abu Dhabi's history of progression across the years. So is it something that you've looked at when you were designing the road?
I hold it like that because I left it on this podium. We did look at the story, but most of it we heard about people, telling us most of the things. And I never heard about the volcano, but it sounds extremely interesting. But in terms of this road and these 10 minutes, I haven't shown actually most of the other junctions. And we did research each of the areas that are key moments. It's not only Qasr al-Hassan, but we have the other junctions. So there's 8 junctions that we acknowledge, and you have the palace, as you said, where we have the cultural junction. So in each of them, we heard from other people, and we research in order to bring a bit of that memory. On this short presentation, I didn't have enough time, so I just picked 2, but I would be very happy to be in contact with you and just hear some more.
Thank you. Sir. You need to switch the microphone on.
Hi.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name is Jose Chong. I am working from the Global Program on Public Space here in Habitat. Actually, I wanted to congratulate For Abu Dhabi. We have been collaborating with them, and also we invite you to the legacy projects. No, actually, I was following up the sculpture that is interesting because it's the sculpture is related to a mobility plan. And this is important. It's not only the public art, it's also the activation and the relation with urban development. And also there will be on Wednesday actually the tree planting as a WUF living legacy. That is like the efforts of the Emirates like to plant 500,000 trees along the whole Emirates. So actually this is quite interesting because also relates what is happening with urban development and with initiative like to have a more lively city. And actually like my comments is a little bit related for most of the presentation. That is what I miss a little bit is the issue of participation. Because for example in the last presentation when you get like this information that it was missing, because most probably it was missing a big engagement and a participatory process where you can involve the communities on the design of the public space. What we are promoting like from since Habitat 2 in reality is like to engage the community like also to the design of the public space. We have several tools, for example like to engage on the participatory design, like we involve kids on the public space design. For example, we are using games as Minecraft, I don't know if you know the name, there's a computer game as a Lego, that is like to get ideas of the kids on how to improve the public space system. For example, we did that workshop in Sharjah, and also what I was missing in general is like to have like a more comprehensive analysis of the network of public space. Because it seems like most of the interventions are isolated interventions, but as Maria was mentioning, it's like the connection with the neighborhood public space and analytical analysis of where do you want to have like this kind of intervention, like to make more valuable of these sometimes expensive public art interventions. So I think these are two comments that is important in consideration. The other issue is about compact urban development. Because also this is something that is related to sustainability. This is something that is maybe is not related only for Abu Dhabi, but is what is happening with the sprawling of the city. So if you tend like to have a more compact urban development, it's like you also will improve walkability in the whole city. So and the last issue is about maintenance. Our experience working with several cities and even like the richest cities, one of the main challenges is not only the creation of the public space, it also how to maintain this work. And actually involving the communities, creating communities, making a management committee can help you also with public art like to maintain the public space. So it's not only going to be something that is one-off, expensive intervention, also they will help you to maintain the public space and to change the culture through that continuous engagement. And I think that you have an important opportunity there, like to involve, like from the beginning of the process, continuous involvement, but also like to change the culture about urban living in Abu Dhabi. But in general, I see that it's like a very good effort. It's like so many things, like comparing currently I'm living in Kuwait, for example. I having the opportunity like to travel to a lot of Arab countries. And actually, the effort that you are doing in Abu Dhabi is fantastic. It's something that has to be recognized and to be promoted to another cities. Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, wow, that was a very interesting series of comments there. Would any of the participants like to give out? Yes.
Thank
Barbara.
you. Yes, so the challenge is a little bit, given 15 minutes, we have a topic. So I talk about art, but if you'd ask me to give a 15-minute speech about asset management and the plans to involve the community in that, I could do that, right? Same thing, that the plans all over the city of Abu Dhabi, they're all connected. There's a network, there's a grand master plan. It's just we're a little bit pressed for time, so we were asked to kind of show you a couple pieces, right? There's right now many dozens and dozens of other artworks that are being planned. I showed you a couple, right? And so you have to respect that you've just really seen a little bit of what's going on. And so the first thing I asked a muralist is, show me, how do you keep your murals? Do you water spray? Do you power spray? Do you varnish? Do you use solar? Do you use UV? What kind of colors? That goes with every single artwork, right? And so there's a lot more. I just want to say, trust us that
Mr.
the thinking is a bit deeper.
Indeed. Mr. Al-Junabaini.
She already mentioned one note I was going to mention, but I would add also on the community outreach aspect. We may not go the way, I've not done it the way that the rest of the world has done it, but we actually went out on a few events and actually engaged in the events the visitors to that park to ask them what do they feel about that park, their sense of belonging to that park. So that attachment and their sentiment to it allows us to not only think about where we will go, we also ask the kids to draw what they envision for the space, but also what they feel about it, the history, their attachment to it. Both of these things we have to look at simultaneously whenever we want to come to do things better. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. I'm conscious that you lot look really hungry, and you've shown sort of amazing pluck and courage to actually stick it out. So thank you. We've got about 7 minutes to go, and what I'd like to do is just ask the audience if there's one more question from the audience before I turn to the panel to provide their sort of final comments. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, in that case, I would like to first of all provide some sort of comments from Maria, please.
Well, thanks, Olga, for the presentation. Once again, what I would like to address is, some things that are missing because, or perhaps are not missing, but were not there at the presentation. But most of the times they're missing because they're the most tricky parts when it comes to transforming our cities. And this has to do with traffic organization. So you're creating a long, long, long walk on a historical boulevard that has several junctions and intersections. So what about traffic lights and how long pedestrians have to wait at the intersections? I hope that this may be used as a chance to introduce pedestrian-friendly traffic lights at these intersections. And I would go even a step further. What about prolonging the sidewalks through the junction? So pedestrians always stay at the same level, and perhaps cars have to drive up and down. Okay, I know that this is not everybody's favorite, okay, and in some countries, like Greece, where I originally come from, it's still like science fiction, but I wanted to mention it still, that there's this possibility as well. Then one last thing, the steps where you have these water elements, I'm not talking about the zero depth fountains, suggest that it will be allowed for the children to go into the water and perhaps play there as well or bathe. That's wonderful. So that's in there as well. And then the accessibility for everybody to the elevated parts, make it to be a bit tricky. And last but not least, I would like to use the opportunity to say these are wonderful projects, and once again, thinking them together, combining them together, and interconnecting them via a network of linear green is actually exactly the thing that would create such an added value. And if there's such a master plan there, then I can only say wow and good luck and big success.
Sharifa?
I think by now everyone has memorized what I'm going to say. But there's a really important thing I wanted to highlight here, maybe because maybe you haven't researched this very well. But one of the researchers that he does is Sukas 2004. He estimated that economic terms, when we're talking about tourism with disability, that's very important. Many people don't talk about tourism with disabilities. And they estimated that this is an opportunity lost by 20% of global tourism market share. I mean, we have to take this seriously. Increase tourism with disability, having accessibility part of it, and it should be part of everyone's presentation. Consideration of safety is very important. So yes, water is really nice, but just consider the depth and all of these important information about that. I like that a lot. Olga's presentation considered safety. I've missed maybe you mentioning that the pathway itself, the boulevard, is quite away from traffic, and I like that because we have a lot of intellectual challenges where they don't understand safety. And a lot of parents feel intimidated to go out in the street and be part of the community. So considering that is very important in every aspect. Family dynamic is so important. We love to be, sitting together, eating together, having barbecues when the weather is great. So having stations that, that is well designed so that, they don't need to get the rubbish and all that, could be effective. And lastly, a very well-known quote, "A city well designed is designed for all." Thank you.
Andrew?
Yeah, and it seemed to me that some of the threads were about what is the authenticity that you can draw from Abu Dhabi through these studies about climate, nature, art and culture, and in a way history. Just pick that theme out of yours, Olga, because they all together they're the basis of what the future of Abu Dhabi should be. And I think there's some very strong messages I think that came from all of the narratives about what you could do to really give Abu Dhabi a completely unique and amazing future identity. I think the other thing that struck me was actually all of the projects were about, in a way, retrofitting existing spaces that don't work. And it'd be interesting to know what messages are going to the future projects that you're planning. But one of the things that struck me about the fact that you're using existing spaces, it did occur to me that actually, why did there need to be public spaces always? Maybe there's other ways of actually dealing with them. Maybe they should actually be built. And certainly in terms of the mega scale of the last project, just to try and think that it's a landscape project, maybe not the right solution if you want to really activate that 6 kilometers, should it just be open space. So some really interesting sort of themes and issues came out for me.
Thank you. Well, I think it's time to wrap up. I mean, we've got about 3 minutes to go. And what I'm very heartened by in all of these presentations was that it was very, very true to the theme of this World Urban Forum on connecting culture and innovation. I mean, when we think about culture, it's so easy to kind of think that culture and innovation is juxtaposed, one looking to the past, time-tested rituals, traditions, and innovation being something associated with technology, the future, something disruptive. And yet both of them are inextricably linked. Culture and innovation in Abu Dhabi, for me, is about a culture of innovation. And when you think about the fact that you've got 89% of the population in Abu Dhabi, that's from a very diverse series of backgrounds, ethnicities and genders, I think that provides an incredibly culturally rich setting to create design. So I'm first of all enlightened by the fact that it was an incredibly sort of diverse bunch sitting here and presenting and doing something really that does embrace culture and innovation. And it also tells me something else. And the second point and the final point is that ultimately, if we're to really truly create sustainable products, we really have to have a sustainable process in place. And I think it's through forums like this that allows us to engage with the general public. And it's not just about people at the top, a top-down solution, but a bottom-up solution that's also supported through academia, private corporations, civil society and state, that allows us to create those sustainable processes. So hats off to DMT, Department of Municipalities and Transport, for putting this together. My microphone is failing. That means I've got to actually stop now. Thank you very much to all of those wonderful designers here. Rasmus, Kishore, Barbara, Olga, sorry. Am I pronouncing your name right? Okay, thank you very much. And obviously the panelists, fantastic. Maria, Sharifa, Andrew, myself, Jason. Thank you very, very much.